Hey there, Matt. How you doing?
Hey, Danny, good to meet you
Yeah,
virtually.
finally, virtually. The beauty of living in different states.
I know, I love it. It's so cool.
Thank you so much for having a chat with me today. I'm very appreciative.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're in Brisbane, right?
I'm in Brisbane. Are you from here?
I am from Brisbane originally, yeah.
Where were you born?
Well, I was born in Brisbane, but kind of grew up all over the coast. So I'm not really from one place in Queensland per se. Yeah, kind of grew up all over. But
Okay, cool.
my dad is in like the Springwood area at the moment, and my mum's in the Valley.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I don't come back very often.
All right. Well,
Well, I mean, it's not really been that easy over the last.
I was gonna say I don't think you could come back today if you wanted to. So
This stage, there is very anti anyone from another state coming into the state.
yes. Yes, at this moment that is true.
Yeah.
Unless you're AFL or, a big Hollywood movie.
Oh, of course, of course. Then it's perfectly fine as long as we're making Anna money.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, yeah. Again, thank you very much for joining me. I'm so excited to, I guess, hear about your career and your experiences around kind of making it as an actor. The first thing that I kind of like to start off with, just because it's interesting to kind of see how your journey may have gone since originally kind of moving into it. But when you were first starting out as an actor, what was your idea of what was your goal? What was your idea of making it?
It's funny because I started acting sort of as an amateur when I was 11 years old. And I'm the youngest of four. And so I did everything that my brothers and sister did. So I was a swimmer because my sister was a swimmer. I played hockey because my brothers were hockey players. I, played an instrument because my sister played an instrument. So there were all these things that I was always doing to be like my older siblings. And they had actually all done like the grade six, end of elementary school play or musical. So
Okay.
again, I got that opportunity. So I actually followed them into it, but I was the only one that stuck with it. And when I talk to people today, I talk about, knowing from as soon as I sort of got that first bite of the bug when I was 11, that I knew that this is what I was going to do or what I was going to devote my life to pursuing.
Okay.
So yeah, I even the TV show Fame was very popular at the time. So this was in the 80s. And I tried to convince my mother that she should move with me to New York City so that I could go to the New York City School of Performing Arts, the Performing Arts High School. Because apparently, I don't know, the legend is that one of the girls that I had done community theater with in Garden, Massachusetts had done that, and so my mother was like, well, that's never going to happen. But I ended up going to New York University, which is a private university in New York in the Village, at age 18, and then started booking. Within 3 months of getting to New York, I booked my first professional job.
Oh wow, what was that first job?
It was a play called The Butterfingers Angel, which is by William Gibson, who also wrote The Miracle Worker, I believe. And it was just a small, like, regional tour for Christmas. So it's a big play, but they had reduced it to 3 actors and sort of like truncated it. So it was sort of one of those sort of children's theater, and it's actually a faith-based tour because I'm
Okay.
Catholic. So it was through a faith-based organization. We took it to different churches around the area.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Well, that's pretty exciting that you moved there and then 3 months in you get your first gig.
Yeah, yeah, and because I studied musical theater, so I mean, when we talk about acting, and especially with screen actors, I guess people sometimes don't understand that there's a difference between what we choose to pursue as actors, whether that's
Okay.
screen or the stage, and musical theater is its own thing as well. Um, yeah, and so I mean, I still primarily live, I suppose, in musical theater, even though I do a lot of screen acting as well. Um, yeah, but there seemed to be, because I'm tall and I was athletic and I'm like naturally coordinated, so I was a good dancer without even really having to do a whole lot of training. There were seemed to be a lot more opportunities for me to work in music theater when I was in my
Okay.
20s. So I think compared to other actors, I sort of went in with this skill set that I had been honing through amateur productions as a singer and a dancer, and that really quickly translated into the professional world.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Well, what happened with if you were moved to New York to go to university and then you got a job that was a touring job within 3 months, what did that mean for your studies?
It was during the winter break basically. So it was between, yeah, it was between terms. Yeah, so it was like a mini tour. So it was a couple of months of touring, and then we were back into study again.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Wow. So kicking off the acting career in New York, I can only dream about how amazing that is. I was reading your profile, and you spent time on Broadway.
Yeah, I've toured with Broadway shows, yeah, around America and Europe, and then I've done a couple of Broadway, Broadway, I guess, yeah, Broadway tours in Australia. So like the first show I did was The Producers, which was a recreation of the Broadway musical.
Okay.
Like same set, same choreography, same everything. Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's something that I've always done. I don't know. It's funny because I've done it for so long. I'm sort of like, yeah, well, whatever.
Well, I mean, it's not really whatever, because there's so many of us that are kind of kicking off that journey, and it takes, I think, especially in Australia, it can take a really long time to get your kind of feet wet in the acting pool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Did you do a university program in acting?
no, well, I started. I don't personally have any traditional education from an acting perspective. I started a performing arts degree when I lived in Manchester in the UK, and I got about a year and maybe 2 months into the second year of the degree, and I remember sitting in a class one day, and the tutor basically said, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you want to be?" And all I could think was, this course is gearing me up to be a teacher, and I don't want to be a teacher. I want to act. And I quit the next week.
Yeah. I asked that just because it's been interesting for me, as someone who moved from the States to Australia, that I think it's very difficult for people that have not trained in one of the major acting institutions in Australia to be taken seriously by this industry. And I find that perplexing.
Yeah.
Especially as someone who has worked in LA and who's worked in New York, and where there's just like all these people, and they're just people are authentic and interesting and skilled in their own ways. I mean, there's exceptions obviously in Australia. Like I guess Joel Edgerton, I don't think trained. Like you hear about some of them, but yeah, I mean, in Brisbane, it's interesting as well because I see all these. If we go back to music theater, I see all these people that trained at these really good dance schools here and have done, like Stedfords and blah, blah, blah. And so they come into the industry and they're really, really skilled. But if they haven't gone through, a NIDA or a VCA or Queensland Con, sometimes it's really difficult for them to get a foothold, which I think is frustrating.
It is frustrating, especially when I don't think people have to go to an acting school to be able to act, obviously. I mean, these are skills that can be learned. I mean, obviously some people have it, some people don't, but I think that acting, like many things, is something that can be learned by doing. I feel like we're getting a little bit closer here to not always having to have that traditional background, but it is difficult. Like I did Screenwise for a year a couple of years ago, did their show reel course, and when I finished, and we were told at that point, don't look for an agent until you finish the course, blah blah blah. But then when we finished the course in I think October, November time, we were basically told, don't try to get an agent now, wait until the new year, because all the agents will just be focusing on the drama school kids that are finishing.
Focusing on all the grads.
Which is really interesting. But I think
I teach at the Factory Acting Studio up here, and I also teach at another place called Australia Actors Studio in Brisbane. And I look at the quality of the work of these that the people in my classes are doing, and it's very, very high. And I'm constantly saying, you just have to have fortitude. You just keep going. I'm
Yeah.
like, you've got the skill. Like, you know, you might not have gone to WAPA or whatever, but I'm like, you have the skill, and they're constantly honing that skill. And then it's just, I guess it's a matter of time. I always talk about being an actor. It's like being a long distance runner. It's not a sprint. You know what I mean? You just have to like you can have sprints, you know, when you book, and then you're like in something. If for a little bit of time when you're in something, you know, you're like the king, but then you're back to just, you know, back out there on the, you know, it's like jogging. You just have to start jogging again and eventually work up to that marathon.
I think, I mean, anyone that's listening, I've spoken about this many times before, but it's definitely an industry, even more so in this country, where you just have to be kind of resilient and patient and keep making the right steps forward, because you will eventually kind of get there. But
yeah, and you have to be present. I mean, this is another thing that drives me crazy. This is the American in me, because I lived in Fiji for 7 years and I did casting over there. And so I still sort of like occasionally do some casting stuff here. And I'm always amazed when I like, for example, you know, I Google searched you earlier, you know what I mean? And you know, if you put your name and actor, like everything I need comes up. But I'll find like I'll be watching something on the ABC and there's this actor I'd never seen before, and I'll search their name and I can't find any information about them. Or I go to their Instagram and there's not like a good picture of them. There's not like a clean picture I can use to sort of submit, you know, if I were to submit as a casting agent. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, like I don't know. I don't feel like I'm ahead of the curve with social media or anything, but sometimes I just think, well, I mean, and again, it's everybody's choice if they want to use social media for their business or they want to use it for private. But I just get very frustrated because that's the New Yorker in me. I get very frustrated when I want to find out information about someone and it causes, you know, and it's hard. Like I'm not, it like basically they then lose my attention, like they fall off my radar. Like I love, you know, I follow you on Instagram, as you probably know, and I've been very interested in what, you know, how you present yourself on social media, and then, you know, and your links, and it's easy to find your work and it's easy to sort of see what you're about as an actor. And I think that's really important as well, especially, you know, with US production coming over here, people that might not know a local jurisdiction, they're able to just kind of go in and be like, oh yeah, that person's legit.
yeah, well, yeah. Well, I hope casting directors are looking at my stuff and not going, yeah, no, we won't contact him. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, yeah, I think Australia is a bit of a funny place when, like, going back to what experience you need. But presence, I thought when you said being present, I thought you were going to talk about being present from a like thing perspective.
An acting point of view. Well, yes.
As opposed to being present and front of mind.
Well, both of those are important, but you know, if you're not front of mind, it doesn't matter how present you are in your acting if nobody can see it.
Well, yeah, that is very true. So have you, obviously you've talked a little bit about teaching, which I'll kind of delve into in a minute, but given that you started out pretty quickly in New York, have you had other jobs and careers to help pay the bills while you were trying to make it as an actor?
Yes. And I've worked a million different jobs. I think that's what people don't realize about actors is that I've been very lucky probably the past few years that, and I'm also married to somebody who has a full-time job, you know, and so I don't have to be the breadwinner. So I've been pretty lucky the past few years to only be working sort of as an actor or a coach or, you know, as a casting consultant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, even then, even in amongst that, I still grab other jobs like this. Like I've just applied to be like a trivia host, you know what I mean? And I used to do a lot of food service when I was younger. I worked for a company called Drury Design Dynamics, and we did corporate events. So I was sort of like a stylist for them. Yeah, and I've temped in many, many offices from, you know, from theater companies to design or advertising companies to just Wall Street, you know, or like, you know, typical. Like I used to work at Optus in North Sydney, as a receptionist. So that was sort of like a 4-day-a-week sort of thing, you know?
Yeah, sure. So, and back when you were kind of starting out, did you have those moments where you had to decide, or it's go to work or do an audition, or it's earn money or prepare for an unpaid theatre gig or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I mean, it's slightly different when you're in, a hub like New York, like an entertainment hub like New York, because I was so bold in my 20s. I'd be like, well, yeah, that big movie or that big Broadway show is auditioning on Thursday, but I've got a shift at the coffee shop, so screw them. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna let the universe do its thing, and I'm just gonna show up to the things when I'm available.
Yeah.
And I have actually gone back to that a lot. Like, now that I'm in my late 40s, I sort of was like, oh, what was that about being 26, 27 and being so sure of myself that I've lost? Yeah, and so sometimes, like, I don't get upset anymore now. Like, if there's an audition, I have to pass in the audition, or I miss a deadline, or I hear about something too late. I'm like, well, I try to do as much as I can do, but I also work within working hours. So I have like a schedule for myself, which is a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 sort of schedule, where
Sure.
I try to schedule all of my teaching and all of my meetings within those times. And I get a little bit cranky, when I have to work outside of those hours, although I choose to work outside of those hours a lot, which is fine. Like, I'm doing an independent film right now in Brisbane, and we're shooting like completely on Friday nights, Saturdays, and Sundays. But I'm happy about that because I knew that's what I was getting into.
Sure.
You know what I mean? As opposed to if I were in something and all of a sudden they were, if I'm teaching and all of a sudden they're like, hey, are you going to teach on a Sunday for us? I'm like, no.
Absolutely not.
It's my day off. No.
Yeah, sure. I remember when I was younger, because I moved to the UK when I was 2 months after I turned 18. It was for a guy that I've met online, but that's part of the reason. But the other part of the reason was to kind of pursue acting. But I went straight to Manchester, and I had an agent for a little while, although it was an extras agent, but I don't think in the UK they have the same negative ideas about extras as what they do here in Australia. Negative is the wrong word. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're an extra. You're an extra. If you're an actor, you're an actor.
And limitations.
At that point in my life, I didn't really understand what it took to be an actor. Like, I was in my head, I was so sure that I was going to make it and be an actor, but I had a full-time job in a call center that I had the shifts for the entire year. And if I took a day off or if I called in sick, they would absolutely ring me out for not being at work. So I was getting calls from the agency to go to castings or to basically to do work, but I kept saying no because I had a shift. I'm like, I can't do that. I've got a shift tomorrow. And I did some stuff. I did a couple of episodes of Hollyoaks and stuff like that. But after a while, they were like, we're not calling you anymore because you're never available. And I just didn't understand what it took to be an actor at that point in my life. You really got to be prepared to kind of sacrifice, or not prepared to sacrifice is definitely something that you need to do, but I think you need to be very aware of the things that you need to make choices about if you are serious about the industry.
Yeah, I still struggle with that. Again, with like family commitments, I'm sure all actors can relate to this. Like I missed like one of my best friend's weddings, for example, because I had a gig, and it was sort of like, it was like production week. It was like, I could not miss those rehearsals, so that's something that I still struggle with sometimes.
That's a nice thing to have to struggle with, though.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, exactly. And he forgave me. I'm still friends with him and his wife.
Very good. So I'm keen to understand, I'm just kind of changing tact a little bit. Obviously, we've discussed this a little bit on Instagram, but we're both gay men. So I'm keen to hear how that may or may not have impacted you, I guess more in TV and screen acting. I think theatre is probably a little bit different when it comes to sexuality, but when it comes to TV and film, has that had any kind of impact on your ability or on how you present yourself?
Absolutely, 100%. You were saying that you went to Manchester, to sort of follow a guy. I mean, I came to Sydney to follow a guy. I've been with him, for 21 years, so it was obviously a good choice. Um, but I actually was with an agent who I still have a great association with. But when I moved to Sydney, I don't know. I mean, I guess because I'm friends with like New York in the 90s when I was at school, there were I was going to say a lot of openly gay actors, but maybe not a lot. But like, I'm friends with Anthony Rapp, who's on Star Trek, and he plays a queer character on that. And he was in the musical Rent as well. So there were a lot of actors that sort of were queer in that show. And yeah, and so I sort of came from an actor activist sort of place from a
Okay.
very young age as an actor. And so what I was going to say about this agent in Sydney was that before I signed up with him, when I first moved to Sydney, I sort of made a point to let people know that I was gay in the industry, which did limit me definitely at that time in the night. And that particular agent, who I ended up going with later, at the time was telling his clients, you can't talk about being gay. This was like, this was actually the early 2000s. He was like, you absolutely cannot sign with me if you're going to be gay, if you're going to talk about being gay. And I was like, well, dude, I clearly don't want to be with you because that's not, I guess, it was before we talked about our actor brand, but I mean, I guess my being a proud out gay man has always been something that's important to me, and it influenced a lot of the work that I did in my early career. He's, by the way, this agent has completely changed his tune, and he's got plenty of openly queer people on his books and everything like that, and so that's nice to see. But yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about Screen is we play on stereotypes, right? We play on binaries. We play on the binary of masculine and feminine, and so if I am a masculine presenting person, which I imagine I am, as a cisgender male, that I'm relatively masculine presenting, and it's not because I'm attempting to be that. It's something that's just perhaps came from a lifetime of like having to, hide the fact that I'm gay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I've always, there's never been any problem with me being cast as straight, but I always try to queer every single character that I ever do. So
Okay.
so I'm about to do a production of Mamma Mia up here in Queensland, and I'm playing Bill, who's like, for all intents and purposes, he's like, in the end of the show, he hooks up with a character named, the character Rosie. And so it's presumed that he's straight, but I'm like, no. I will know that he's actually bisexual.
Okay.
He's trying to hook up with everybody on that island, and perhaps has been doing it on the down low. And now, now he's going to get with Rosie too. So
Well, that's really interesting.
Queer every character I do.
Well, I think that's really good, I guess, for me personally to hear, because I was recently kind of advised to lean into the gay in me. I mean, my show reels are all masculine presenting straight men, but also they always tend to be, well, they have been in the past roles that I've played, more not necessarily aggressive, but like domineering kind of men, which is
I'm a character actor, so I play soldiers, I play policemen, I play sort of authoritative figures.
But I mean, it's the complete opposite to who I am as a person. And it's really interesting, obviously at the moment, we're going through a period of time where diversity and inclusion is extremely prevalent within the industry, which is great, and it's about time. But I think because of the way that I hold myself, or my preconceived ideas of how a straight masculine presenting male should or should not act, means that I've definitely pushed down any type of mannerisms or the way that I speak or the way that I hold myself that could be misconstrued as gay.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what the character is, but it's really interesting to hear that you bring a bit of queerness into any role that you do, because that does give you that allows you the ability to be authentically you, but still playing, a seemingly straight role.
Yeah, I did a play in Brisbane last year for Brisbane Pride. Believe it or not, we were able to do plays last year, called Smiley, which was a gay rom-com from Spain by Guillaume Clua. And so Sergio Ulloa Torres, who was my co-star, is gay, and our director Liam Burke is gay, and I'm gay. And it was this, like, because we all had the lived experience of the characters. I mean, obviously, we're actors, so everything that Bruno did is not my experience, but we were talking about, using Grindr or visiting a sauna or, some of these things that maybe sometimes we're ashamed to talk about, blatantly as gay men, which is weird because, people talk about sex all the time. So I don't know why I still, shy away from it, but it was so amazing to be in that room, in that rehearsal. And I did things as an actor. I was so brave to do things that I like I kept saying to the director, I'm like, am I being like too camp? Am I being too over the top? He's like, well, you're an architect that likes 1930s black and white movies. So it's okay if you're a little bit camp and over the top. He's like, it makes sense for the character. I'm like, yeah, I know. But because I've had to suppress that, for so much of my career.
Same. I get it.
But it was so freeing and amazing, and I loved it. And I mean, I think that's, and if you look at someone like Murray Bartlett, who's on The White Lotus, and I've known Murray for years and years and years. He's a Sydney boy, and he's been out for a long time. And and he's just Murray, what I mean? He's not trying to be anything. He's just being him. And it's just great to see him being able to, do a role like in The White Lotus and to be queer, looking or any of the other things that he's done. Yeah.
Which is really interesting because, I mean, I love Murray as well. I mean, I don't know him, but I mean, I love watching him, although we have chatted on Instagram since White Lotus. He's, he does like the looking character and the White Lotus character, and he's in Tales of the City as well, right?
Yeah.
It's obviously different situations and different characters, but it's very clear to see that that's who Murray is in all of these roles, which is, beautiful to see as a gay man, seeing gay representation on television, and somebody having that permission to just authentically be themselves on screen is fantastic. And it's really interesting, just like the whole conversation around type and character and etc. I had a walk with someone this morning who's just starting out as an actor, and he's doing a degree at the moment at AFTT, and he was like, they're not teaching me how to break down a character. I need, like, if I'm playing this person, I can't bring me into it. It needs to be like I'm playing someone else. And I'm like, well, no, you just need to bring bits of you to that character, and then you've got the character. It's all you. But I think when we start out as actors, and it's only been the last 2 weeks where I've had this conversation with someone around type and brand, that it's kind of clicked that, no, you need to fucking bring yourself to it and just be unapologetically you, but within the realms of that kind of character. But we're also eager to prove our acting chops and how good we are at being something that isn't us.
Yeah.
We tend to focus really heavily on something that is the complete opposite of who we are, to show, look how versatile I am, look how good I am at being something else.
Yeah. I tell my actors this all the time when I'm teaching. I'm like, I just want to see you imagining yourself in that situation and saying the words that are on the page. Jennifer Lawrence said that when she first started out. So they're like, how are you such a good actor? She's like, well, I listen to someone and then I say what's written on the page. It's like, that's it. And it's so true. If you watch her, like she's still, and she's very present. Now we're going back to actually being present as an actor. And then she's just imagining what how she would respond in that situation. And so she's using, yeah, lived experience. I think I'm a big advocate of that. I mean, I understand that sometimes it's not safe, you know, to use a lived experience, you know, if it's an abusive situation or something like that. But like I just did another play, which we actually ended up filming, so we won't do it live, which was about suicide bereavement. And so 3 of the 4 actors in it, have, including myself, have experienced a suicide in our, you know, a family member or a close friend. And again, like the accessibility of that was so, it was so, it was difficult, you know, emotionally it was difficult, but it was so easy for me to access those things because I have that lived experience. I didn't have to create like this whole world around it. I was like, oh yes, I remember 11 years ago when I got that phone call. You know what I mean? And it's like, and suddenly, boom, I'm there again. Yeah. So I think lived experience is very important. I mean, not to say that you can't play a character that you don't have lived experience of, but if you have the choice, if you're doing a play with a bunch of gay characters and you can hire gay actors that have had, you know, I don't know, I'm always like, no, hire the queer actors. I'm like, I don't care. Like, yeah, they're straight and they're great and they can play the role, but I don't care. Hire the queer actors. I got in a fight with my husband about this, about Ewan McGregor and Halston.
Okay.
Because Ewan McGregor was great in Halston.
He was.
But I'm like, but come on. Like the world is full of actors.
I know. And then we've got, I know, I can't wait to watch it, but obviously we've got Colin Firth and Stanley Tucci in, I can't remember the name of the film right now.
Yeah. Another one you're talking about.
Yeah, but I think we're starting to see a shift in those casting decisions to cast straight actors in gay roles, or at least we're starting to see some stuff, which is nice. Like
yeah, I mean, Boys in the Band was great. That's all, like everybody in that's gay. And I'm friends with Brian Hutchinson, who played like the straight character in it. You know what I mean? And so, and he was saying as well that just the freedom of exploration in that rehearsal room, because it was a Broadway show and then they filmed it for Netflix, because nobody had to hide or be ashamed of their experiences, that, you know, there was just a lot of freedom in that rehearsal room, which I think is great. I mean, I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, is if actors are in a room together, you have to, the director or the producers have to create a safe environment where you feel that you can fully explore the character without shame or judgment.
Yeah. I think, I mean, look, I've only been forging ahead within the career properly within the last 4 years, but have always been kind of passionate about acting. But for a very long time, I just like the idea of being gay, or trying to play gay characters was not anything that I ever dreamed of or thought that I should be going after, because there's just so little, there had been so little representation of gay characters in a lot of mainstream stuff. And when there was gay characters, they were very heterosexual people playing those roles, like Brokeback Mountain. I mean, beautiful film, to very heterosexual actors. And so it made sense to me when I started on the journey again to forge ahead in this career that I should be focusing on proving to casting directors and everybody that I can play a straight man, because that's what's going to get me work.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to, you know, the binary of film, I mean, it's based on what you see immediately. So, you know, when your face pops up on a screen, you know, there's certain characteristics that you have, like your beard, for example, that we associate with, you know, with masculinity, and therefore associate with straight.
Yeah.
I mean, so like in my mere presence, I mean, I work with an acting coach named Kim Farrant, who's amazing. And Kim's like, Matt, she's like, everything that you have is enough. And she said, you just, when you are present, when you appear on screen, we already understand a lot about you. She's like, so then when you're being sensitive or shut down or any of those things that you naturally do because you're so used to trying to hide who you are, she's like, the camera loves it.
Yeah.
Because she's like, and it doesn't necessarily read it, you know, what you might be experiencing, but the camera absolutely adores seeing, seeing your struggle, I guess, you know what I mean? The struggle to constantly try to represent my authentic self against, you know, a lifetime of a lifetime of wondering if it's okay to express my genuine self.
Well, I mean, obviously, as gay men, we do go through a very long period of time of suppressing who we are and not feeling like we're allowed to be our authentic self. And then even going as you, I mean, obviously, the older we get, the less painful it becomes, but for a very long time, you're always coming out. Like every job that you start, you're coming out. Every person that you meet, you're coming out. So it's like, or you're not coming out, or you're just not talking about it because you don't feel comfortable in doing it. So to get to an industry where you feel like there's not a lot of representation, to then to get comfortable with being able to be your authentic self in an industry where it's not traditionally been okay is a bit of a mindfuck.
Yeah.
Within, I mean, going back to the whole, you know, your acting journey since you started, I think something that I quite like to talk about a lot on the podcast is, I guess, the struggles with mental health and self-critique, etc., that we kind of go through, which is, you know, I think it's part and parcel of the job. But it's very easy when we're going through it to make it all about ourselves and feel like absolutely nobody else is experiencing this because we see our mate is doing well and they're on TV, and you speak to Matt, who's done play after play after play this year, and you're like, well, I can't even get in the fucking room with a casting director. I'm obviously doing something wrong. Tell me about your kind of struggles, if you've had any, around that space.
Oh, constantly.
What do you do to kind of combat that?
I honestly, the first thing that comes to mind, because I suffer like great anxiety, especially about line learning now, which is interesting because, you know, I've done some big shows recently. In fact, I've done a lot of shows. I'd say that's sort of become one of my specialties, to do very dialogue heavy shows. But I still like that anxiety of like, I always feel like I'm never going to be able to do it. And it gets to that first rehearsal where we have to be off book. And I've been able to say it, you know, 100 billion times in my room, and then I suddenly blank out and I can't do it, and they have to put me on book again. And then I feel like I'm a failure, you know, and I'm watching all the other actors around me succeed. So it's definitely something that is so real. But what I was going to go back to originally saying, that what immediately comes to mind is the way that I do use social media is very, people think I'm online all the time, and I do have a pretty big social media presence, but I schedule things and I only spend a certain, like, limited amounts of time, like in my scheduled business day, online, because that's where that comes in for me, is if I'm online and I'm seeing people on their Instagram, you know, and they're like in rehearsals or on the red carpet and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh man, this just, and, you know, and I'm not afraid to mute people or to, you know, to unfollow them. Like just because it just, it does start to drive me a bit mad. Yeah. Cause it's impossible not to compare ourselves to other actors. We all want to be, you know, the most successful that we can be. And everybody, it goes at different paces for different people. And it has to do with relationships and luck and opportunity. And so it's very difficult to not compare myself. So I guess that, so limiting my social media or being careful about how I use my social media is the way that I sort of try to keep myself mentally well. Although, I mean, I've had some pretty low times.
I can imagine. What about when it comes to the uncertainty of auditioning and waiting for that feedback that never ever comes, and how you cope with that?
Just again, I mean, you know, this Kim Farron who I was talking about before, this acting coach, and Emily Joy says this as well, who's another acting coach. Like, you just have to, you just have to, every audition is a success. You know, even to be asked to put down a tape or whatever is a win. So you just have to acknowledge that and maybe do like any little thing to treat yourself, you know, like, you know, have a lolly or whatever it is that's going to make you feel good and acknowledge like, yes, that was a success. Yeah, because this self-tape void of never getting any feedback it's maddening. I'm so angry that we have to self-tape for everything now. I'm angry that I don't get to go into the room and I don't get to actually interact with the casting director, or
Yeah,
you know
wow.
what I mean? It really frustrates me. But again, yeah, I mean, and then Maha Wilson was saying, just treat it like a job. Treat it like going to the dentist. She's like, you have to go to the dentist. Nobody wants to go get your teeth cleaned. She's like, but you go in, you get them cleaned, you come out, you've got good dental health. She's like, so that's what you do. You prep your show, you prep your self-tape, you go in, you film it, and then you walk out the door. Yeah. But even at the dentist, when I was a kid, we used to get like little treats. We used to get like, you know, you could put your hand into the treasure chest and bring out like a plastic spider ring or whatever, you know, was it? So I think I thought that was a really lovely way to look at it as well. Is it's like sometimes it's going to be a little painful or something you don't love doing, but it's your job, so you do it. And then like I was saying earlier, there's times where I'm like, I don't have it in me today, so I just pass it in.
Okay.
I don't tape.
Yeah.
I go, well, obviously that was meant for somebody else. That one wasn't meant for me.
Yeah. I mean, I personally like self-taping. Well, I feel like I've got a little bit more control. I've got a little bit more control over what the casting agent sees. But I mean, in all fairness, apart from TV commercials, I've not actually been in front of a casting director for a dramatic role yet. Yeah. So, I mean, I've been in for commercials and they're a beast in their own right as far as auditioning is concerned. But, you know, a lot of the stuff that I've done has always been kind of self-tape for student films or anything else. But I like it because I just feel like you've got that control.
Well, that's great. And I mean, that's important that we do like it. Like I did a self-tape, my friend Asabi Goodman read for me the other day, and we had an absolute ball. And it was something I didn't really want to do. And then we got in the room and she was being hilarious and we just had a really good time. And I sent it in, you know, and I wasn't precious about it. We just did, you know, like 3 takes. And I was like, yeah, that's good. You know, we've got it. And I encourage my actors to just, you know, to only do 3 takes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm like, you know, you can get to like take maybe 12 or 14 when you're going to feel like you're finally really getting it. But ultimately, and Todd McSweeney, the casting director, says this. He's like, I love a first take. He's like, I can learn everything about an actor in a first take. He's like, I'll know if you're going to be nervous on set. You know, I'll know if you're cocky and you have an attitude. You know what I mean? He's like, I'll know if you're present. He's like, I really like first takes. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's an important thing, and I'm glad you brought up that you like them. And we were just talking about mental health, and so it's how we frame our relationship with the self-tape. You know, if we look at it as like like, hey, another awesome opportunity, I get to act, I get to do what I love, then that's great. If you're like, oh man, it's a burden, blah blah blah, that's obviously going to affect your.
Sometimes it's a burden. I think also sometimes it depends on the importance that you put on what it is that you're filming for. So, for example, I submitted a tape, which is on my Instagram, which was for BoJack Horseman, which was for Stage Milk Drama Club. I did 2 takes, 2 different versions, simple, didn't overthink it, just got on with it. But I am also, because I'm planning to move back to the UK next year, I started the process of doing the casting director workshops for the UK. So I filmed something for a workshop in London. I think it did about 25 takes, and it was so frustrating. And I felt like I wasn't getting it. My reader was just like, it's okay, let's go again. I'm like, no, that's it, fuck it, I can't do it anymore. That's it for tonight. I'm not interested. I'll think about it again tomorrow. But then interestingly, I went back and watched the takes. I'm like, oh, this is actually really fucking good.
So, it's interesting what the camera sees sometimes. We're not feeling it, but the camera's seeing
exactly. But I guess what I'm saying there is even though it's just a workshop and it's an opportunity to learn, because in my brain I've put this importance on, I need to impress a UK casting director because I want to move there. It put a lot more pressure. I put a lot more pressure on myself, and I definitely know from an audition perspective, when it comes to self-tapes, I do the same thing. So sometimes I find them fun and it's easy when there's no real pressure. But then if I put a bit of importance on it, then I psych myself out and I'll do way too many takes and then I'll lose the joy.
Yeah, I talk a lot about being an actor, like going to the gym, or I actually talk about running. Have you done Manuel Puro's self-tape challenge? He's a UK casting director.
That's the 21-day self-tape challenge?
Yeah, yeah.
I started on the 4th of September.
Yeah, it's great because it's like running. Like, you know, if I'm gonna go for a run, because I have a love-hate on-off relationship with running, you know, I can't like I haven't been running for a while. So I went for like, I don't know, like maybe like a 3K run the other day. So I couldn't jump up right now and go do a 10K run.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like I have to do like a few 3Ks and then maybe I can increase it to 5, but then I have to drop back to 3, but maybe I'm going to jump ahead to 7, then drop back down to 5, but eventually I'm going to get to my 10. And so when you do something like that 21-day self-tape challenge, you know, the first week it's like, oh God. And then maybe you get to week 14, you're like, oh, this is easy. Like I can memorize things really quickly and get something out. And then like day 15, you're like, all of a sudden you're like, I don't know what I'm doing again. You know? So I think that, yeah, I think also just recognizing that it is that memorization and that acting technique is about stamina as well, and about like regular training. You know, like you look at Olympians, you know, they train every day, whether they feel like they want to get in the pool or not, they just do. And then hopefully they have a coach who's going to encourage them to keep doing their best on that day. And then eventually they're going to get to the Olympics and, you know, they're still going to be doing around the same speed. You know, it might be like 1 second's difference, or, you know, like 0.01 seconds different, but, you know, they're always trying to improve themselves. But you get to a level where you're sort of like consistent, where you're consistent. And so when you do something like that 21-day self-tape challenge, it's just that you find that consistency by the end of it.
I'm a bit daunted by it, but I'm also looking forward to it.
It's very daunting, but I really enjoyed doing it. I did it when I was living in Fiji, and it was nice. And I also, like some of the actors that I did the challenge with, we're still very much like interacting with each other online and all that sort of stuff, and following each other's and celebrating each other's successes.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Do you do something every day, given what you've just said? Do you work on your craft every day?
No, I mean, not in that way. Like I said, I've been surprisingly busy, like, you know, all the seeds that I've sown over that sort of COVID period of nothingness, of 7 months of no work. Everything seems to be working its way out in the moment. So I don't really have to do that, because I'm actually like learning scripts right now for something that I'm going to film on Thursday, or, you know, learning something.
Well, I mean, that is practicing. I mean, that's practicing.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily, because I teach as well. So like, I'm always on analyzing scripts. But I was looking at my profiles the other day, and like I have like a UK accent scene that's really not good. So I was like, oh shit, I need to schedule the self-tape room next week, and I need to go in and I need to just, you know, spend like a half an hour, because I did it like my agent was like, oh, I just need something. And so I did it without really warming up, and I fall in and out of the accent, and it's actually on my profile right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, this, like, that's not helpful in any way whatsoever. So I think next week I have to go back and reshoot some stuff.
Sure. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
Well, look, I mean, I was having a look at your IMDb, and you've obviously you've done quite a lot of stuff, which is great. And I love the kind of Hallmark experience as well. I've got a girlfriend that's moving to Canada soon, and she's like, they tell me that I need to have a Hallmark headshot and like a CW headshot and just a normal headshot. What was that kind of experience like working on the Hallmark stuff?
Yeah, I loved Hallmark. but I did it when I was in Fiji. So essentially, I mean, I sort of like snuck in through the back door, basically. So what happened was the productions were coming to Fiji. I was consulting through the AV commission, through the film commission in Fiji. So I just like, because I'm canny, I read an article in the paper, and then I looked up the production company, and then I sent an email directly to the producers saying, this is who I am. Here's my IMDb. When you get to Fiji, if you need any assistance, like I've worked in the States, blah, 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 blah. So let me know. And then I, sort of met up with people on a, with sort of those people that were making decisions on a very casual basis, just being like, what can I help you with? What can we touch base with? And then that's sort of how I got on it. So I sort of like through persistence sort of got myself on it. And they were so much fun. They were so hard. They're really hard because you can't show. I was talking earlier about how that struggle of me, that my acting coach likes that she can see that struggle of whatever insecurities I'm going through. On Hallmark, it's all happy all the time. So I did my first take on A Summer to Remember. Martin Wood was the director, and what's Catherine's last name? She's on everything. Anyway, she, and we did the first take, and Martin was like, that was pretty dark. He's like, can you just smile? You just smiled the whole time. I'm like, what? He's like, well, he's like, you're giving it like a lot of light and shade, and we really just need to get this. It's the first scene in the movie. We need to get the information out there that, Dr. Jessica is going away to Fiji, and that, you need, and that you want her to leave the hospital. He's like, so can you just smile and just get her out? And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, and so I did. So that was fun. Yeah, but they were hard. Like we did three. I was in 3 scenes in that movie. It was day like 14 of a 3-week. No, it was like day 16 or 17 of a 3-week shoot. Catherine just wanted to go home to see her kids. You know what I mean? Like, and we had to do all 3 of my scenes in the morning, because the other woman that played her best friend, like the lead character's best friend, had to do all 3 of her scenes in the afternoon. So it was like fast and furious, and it was walk and talk as well, sort of that sort of West Wing sort of walk and talk. So it was, yeah, you needed to be like really on it and really skilled. So, and I hadn't done anything for like 2 years. Well, maybe not 2 years, but it had been a while. So I was like, well, here we are. But it was fun. Lots of fun.
Yeah, I bet it was. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'd kind of like to finish up with this question, which is probably a good one for you, considering you're a teacher as well. But if there's any advice that you could give to someone that's kind of starting out, or just a little way through their journey of trying to make it in the industry, what would it be?
Foster your relationships. Foster those relationships. Everyone you're in class with is going to be is like, you're not going to get on with everyone, but the people you do, keep them close. They'll be your advocates. I did an acting class when I first arrived in Sydney with Christy Best. Christy's gone on to be like a presenter for Nickelodeon and all this sort of stuff. And we're still like mates. Like we don't catch up, but we see each other online all the time. Yeah, and I used to do like this practice group called Montourage in Sydney, and it was Ivy Mack and Gabriella Maselli McGrail and like Philip Lowe and all these people, and I'm still like, they're still very important in my life. So foster those relationships and don't treat people like shit. You know what I mean? Like, know that the person that you're in acting class, even if they're being a pain in the ass, might actually be like the first AD on the next thing you get hired for. So you just have to be nice and be interesting and be interested.
All right. Very good advice. I can be very guilty of being a dick myself. So
well, I can too. I think I'm the biggest asshole. And like, no, you're nice. I'm like, you clearly don't see me in my alone time at home when I'm being a dick.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Great, Danny. Thank you.
Is there obviously you're in Brisbane, so what are the plays that people can come and see you in coming up?
Well, you can go to my website, mattyoungactor.com, and find out what I'm doing, because I'm doing Mamma Mia up in Caloundra, COVID willing, in October. There's a lot of the stuff that I'm in is online right now. There's a documentary called The Lockdown that Sarah Stevenson made, where she just talked to a bunch of, it was her sort of like COVID project. She was like, well, nobody can do this. Instead of doing a podcast, she sort of made a film. So that's on YouTube. Yeah. And I mean, I pop up on things every once in a while. So yeah, so just, yeah, if you go to my website, that's probably, or follow me on all socials at Matt Young Actor, and then you can find out more about what I'm doing and hopefully catch stuff.
Awesome. Well, I'll put all of this information in the podcast notes anyway.
Thanks, Jenny. And I really look forward to, seeing you in person when we can move around.
Oh, we can never move around. It will all depend on whether or not Anna is prepared for somebody from New South Wales to come into Queensland.
Yes, or to let someone from Queensland go down to New South Wales and then come back.
Oh, yeah, there's that too.
we can't do right now.
No. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Okay, no worries, mate. Great talking to you.
You too.